Steelers fans, you could win a trip to Super Bowl 55 and a new 2021 F-150. The official truck of the Pittsburgh Steelers, sponsored by Neighborhood Ford Store. Rules and regulations are on the entry page, and remember, this contest is a twofer. Scroll down the page after you voted for the super fan of your choice and enter to win that truck. Visit FordHallOfFans.com/football.
All right, we're back. Bob Pompeani, Chris Mueller. And Chris, let's get right to the Twitter mailbag because we have a lot of that as well as calls here. We'll run through. Our tweet comes from Cuddy in Presto, who says, will Mason Rudolph get a fair shake at any point? He acquitted himself well in Cleveland. How do you know what you have unless you play him? Interesting point. Your take.
I think that's the correct point in terms of saying how do you know what you have unless you play him? You don't. That's the simple answer here. And I think you fall into one of two camps at this point if you're a Steelers fan. And I'm not going to sit here and cast aspersions on one or the other, although I'll tell you where I fall. You either want to see Ben Roethlisberger come back either just for next year at a massive cap number or at a smoothed out number that allows him to play next year and maybe another season after that, or you want to see the Steelers rip the Band-Aid off and see what they've got in Mason Rudolph. And just for the sake of, I think I want to see change, and I haven't seen the status quo yield any championships in over a decade, I would like to see Mason Rudolph. You really can't tell how good he is or not good he is unless he plays real NFL games that are tailored to his strengths.
And that's right. His strength is down the field, and he showed that in that game. So, Cuddy, thank you very much for that tweet in Presto. Now let's go to Fair Chance. We got Jerry on the line. Hey, Jerry, how are you?
How are you, Chris, doing tonight?
We're good. What's up?
Good.
Hey, Bob, I wanted to ask you a question. I believe his name's Todd Gurley, played for the Rams. I think he's with the Falcons now. Mm-hmm. Would the Steelers possibly be interested in him, or is there any way that that could happen?
No. No, only because
Todd Gurley's pretty much shot. He lost his job there in Atlanta, too.
Right. And he's just not the same. For whatever reason, he fell off the cliff very early in his career after a really tremendous start, and he cashed in.
He has an arthritic knee. He has a degenerative knee. He has an arthritic knee. So if you got sick of seeing James Conner get hurt and frustrated by that, Todd Gurley fell on worse injury kind of news that robbed him of the explosiveness that made him so special.
Let me ask you this, because Pony and I were kicking this around, and it is a thought. Not that teams anymore spend first-round picks on running backs, but we saw a lot of Najee Harris in Alabama. I mean, those three kids down there were outstanding all the way through. I'm talking about Mac Jones, Harris, and, of course, Devonta Smith, who may be the best college wide receiver we've ever seen, or at least one of them. If you had a chance at 24 to get a running back like that, would you take him? Would you go? No, I understand. I'm saying the kid was phenomenal, but as far as Najee Harris,
I just had to bust chops.
Najee Harris, that would be something interesting because I think he's a different kind of running back. But you can get them, as we've seen from Derrick Henry and others, second, third, fifth round. You can come up with them everywhere.
There are obviously a lot of busts that you don't hear about that are 6th, 7th undrafted guys, but James Robinson at 1,000 yards is an undrafted guy this year.
How about
for me,
Phillip
it's really
Lindsay?
hard to have.
He's another one with
right.
Denver,
I mean,
right?
So it's very hard for me to evaluate Alabama quarterbacks and Alabama running backs for this reason. Not so much the receivers, because they've been pretty steadily great when they've gotten to the pros. They're playing with an offensive line in front of them that is so much better man for man than pretty much every team they play. The quarterback's never facing pressure. The running back is running through holes that are massive that he's not going to see in the NFL. Najee Harris looks like he is a beast and a special physical specimen. And maybe he turns out to be Derrick Henry, but also maybe he turns out to be Trent Richardson, especially if he's on a team like the Steelers who have major problems up front on that offensive line.
And let's talk about that. You talk about coaches. Everyone wants to focus on the coordinators, but Sean Surratt was given a job because they really didn't look elsewhere. He was the heir apparent under Mike Munchak. And so when Munchak left, he was given that opportunity. And I think he earned the opportunity based on what he did. But at the same time, they didn't look around, Chris. I mean, he could be one of those coaches who, maybe looking for work. I don't know what they're going to do, but I suspect there are going to be changes to that coaching staff.
Well, far be it for me to do this and call for a guy's job. To my knowledge, Sean Surratt has never called for my job to be removed from the fan. But what did he do to deserve it? He was Munchak's understudy. And you're right, like the thing you said there that is the most operative part of that whole dynamic, they didn't really look elsewhere. That's what I want them to avoid. Why is it always in-house, 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 or somebody that has a pre-existing connection? I would say that by and large, despite the fact that people groan and bellyache about him, and maybe he himself is getting stale, The last time the Steelers made a major hire, I mean a major hire, of a guy with no connection to the franchise previously, what was that guy's name? Mike Tomlin. How'd that go?
Yeah.
2 Super Bowl appearances in his first 5 years, a Super Bowl victory in year 2. Like, they need to take off these kid gloves and this idea that they can only promote from within or from a very small circle and widen their gaze here a little bit.
Right, and I think everyone thought they were going to promote from within. Russ Grimm, and then all of a sudden they looked and they were impressed because they looked and they saw Mike Tomlin and they brought him in. All right, let's go to Nunzio and Braddock. Nunzio, what's going on?
Gentlemen, happy days are ahead, but we got to do some serious work on the Steelers. Mr. Rooney, you got to let Tomlin go, and you got to let Ben go, and you got to draft some high draft choices on the line. That's where we're losing the ball games. Offensive and defensive line is where we're losing the games. I mean, Connor got nowhere to run. There's no holes.
Yeah, there aren't. But, you know, they have addressed their line, Nunzio. They drafted Dotson this year, not with first-round picks, although they have in the past, not recently. It's more like Chuck Okorafor. They've slowly brought in younger guys, but I agree with that point, and I think Chris would too, that you need more help on the offensive line because you got an aging offensive line in many of those key positions.
Well, the first name I saw in a mock draft, because yes, I'm a psychopath and I've already been looking up the mock drafts, was Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech, big athletic offensive lineman. They need bodies there. And I know this is another name that, like Roethlisberger, maybe like Tomlin, has become synonymous with this franchise for the last decade. They need a new center. And if you want to talk about it at pick 24, what kind of premium offensive lineman is usually still there? It's probably a center. That's usually around where the first guy at that position in the draft tends to go. If there's a first-round quality guy, they go in that 25-ish range. So I would start looking for Marquise Pouncey's heir apparent, and you might need that guy ASAP because I think the middle of that line is just as weak as some of the other parts.
Mike in Oakland joins us next right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, what's up, gentlemen? I feel like Chris and I are sharing the same mind. I agree with pretty much all of his points about the Steelers and what they should do. I just want to mention this. You know, Mike Tomlin seems to get a pass, and he was great his first 4 or 5 seasons. But as most people mention, he hasn't done anything really in the last 10 years after, you know, the regular season. I know the regular season records have been pretty decent, but he's collapsed 3 straight years. You know, his teams haven't led for 1 second in any of the playoff games since 2016. I mean, what does that say about what's going on there? And I think Art Rooney needs to step up. I think Tomlin, Butler, and Fichtner should go. I know it's not going to happen like that probably, but they should go. And I don't think Ben should be back either. I agree with Chris about Mason. You have this guy. We need to see what he can do. And I think they need to save $20 million. It's $20 million they save. They pay Ben $20 million. They thank him like what they did with Troy, and they let him move on. And we need to see Mason in this transition year. If they stink, they get a high draft pick. If they don't stink, maybe Mason's our future.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. He's right about that.
Checks
When
in the
this
mail,
all
Mike.
started, this started in that Jacksonville playoff game, which we're talking about those 3 end-of-the-year collapses. This preceded that, and it was a collapse in the postseason where it was one of those games like we saw the other night, Chris, where they got blown out in the first quarter and made it look closer than it really was.
Quickly, to Mike's point, I think Roethlisberger and Tomlin's postseason failings, they should be tied together at the hip when you're talking about this last decade of futility. And it is a damning stat what Mike brought up, that they haven't led in any of their previous 3 playoff losses. I'd be a lot more inclined to give Tomlin 1 more year, though, the 1 year that's left on his deal for this reason. If you cut everybody else loose and it's Rudolph, a new offensive coordinator, maybe Butler's either gone or everyone just acknowledges that Tomlin does a lot of the direct work with that defense, then you sort of see what you have there and you decide whether or not you want Mike Tomlin to shepherd over the actual rebuild or you want to cut things clean and say we really are going to start from scratch again and kind of create on the fly a new era for this franchise.
We're due for a break, but before we go there, it's time for tonight's Tri-State Office Furniture Tweet of the Day, and this comes to us from Penguin historian Bob Grove, who keeps all these great numbers. He said Sid's goal tonight was just the second unassisted power play goal of his regular season career. The other came November 28, 2018 at Colorado, but I can guarantee you none of his goals were anything like what we saw there tonight. That was pretty spectacular. It comes in a losing effort as the Penguins go down 6-3. More calls on the way. You're watching the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call here on Pittsburgh's CW.